session 56, and today we will with Genesis 24. Laban and Bethuel accepted that Yahweh has indeed chosen Rebecca for Isaac, that Rebecca would be a soul mate for Isaac. And this is not somebody that Isaac chose, like in our Western culture we discussed. We choose our soulmate because we get butterflies or we get really emotional and we fall in love. But being somebody's soulmate is much deeper and more spiritual, and it's a much longer survival of a marriage. If your soulmate is chosen with the help of your Creator, when He chooses it for you, and you trust Him to find the right soulmate for you. But how can you know that you have found your real soulmate? And what exactly is a soulmate? The idea is that each person has one other person somewhere out there in this big world who is his or her preordained perfect match. A person's soulmate is the ideal companion for your life, and it complements you and it fulfills you in physical, spiritual, psychological, all those difficult words that we hear about when you study psychology. That's what the world sees as a soulmate. Soulmates are like two halves of the same soul, and if you marry the wrong person, you will never be truly happy because you missed your soulmate. This is the world's idea, but it's not a biblical idea. We do not find it in the Bible. The search for a soulmate sounds very romantic, and we see it in Hollywood all the time. But how do you know if the one you are with is really your soulmate? Isn't it possible that you missed your true soulmate, or might still find him or her? What if you were married previously and are now on your second marriage? Was your first spouse your soulmate? The one you are with now, is that maybe your soulmate? The soulmate concept is a foolish idea that ultimately discourages people from getting married because they fear that their prospective match might not be their soulmate. For people already married, the soulmate concept can lead to discontentment and uncertainty and even unhappiness. If there's a little bit of difficulty, then you think, I married the wrong person and this is not my soulmate. Maybe I should get divorced and find my soulmate. The soulmate idea does exist in Judaism, though. It was probably born from a misunderstanding of the Jewish concept of a soulmate. Among Yiddish-speaking Jews, the term for soulmate is bashert, and it's a word that means destiny. A person's ideal spouse is called his or her destined one. How is this different from the romantic soulmate concept of the world, of Hollywood? You cannot speak just out of your own opinion whether somebody is your soulmate because you don't know. Emotions and falling in love is not a good barometer to find your soulmate. So, you cannot seek your destined one because you will not know if you are destined to be together until you marry each other. And that's what we are trying to see here in the life of Rebecca and Isaac. Once you are married, destiny has been fulfilled and proven your soulmate. In other words, your spouse is your destined one. The person you are married to is the person God has ordained for you. If he or she was not, you would not be married. So don't waste your time trying to find your soulmate. He or she does not exist and will not exist until you get married. Once you are married, you can be confident that your spouse is your true soulmate. And then you make your marriage work. Whether you feel like that person after a couple of years is your soulmate or not. If you believe that that person is the one that God destined for you, then you make your marriage work. You spend times on your knees for your spouse. You respect him or her, and you bless him or her in your prayers and in your mind. Because a lot of times we curse our spouse in our mind because of something he or she does wrong. And that creates a different kind of emotion inside of you. Uncertainty and fear and discontent and not being satisfied anymore. And a lot of times, the finger points back to you on how you handle conflict and situations. So we see in Hebrew culture that although there was a lot of prearranged marriages, the girl still had the right to say no if she does not agree. Genesis 24 verse 58. And they called Rebecca and said unto her, Will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. She made the choice. And somewhere in your life, maybe it has already happened. Maybe it might still be in the future for you. Maybe it is today that you get to the point where you will be asked, will you go with this man? Will you go with the Ruach Eliezer? Giving your everything to your bridegroom, Yeshua, Isaac, giving water to the camels, following the Ruach through the desert, not always knowing 100% what is lying ahead for you. That is a question that only you can answer. And I hope your answer will be like Rebecca. I will give you water, and I'll give your camels water too. And I will go with you. Genesis 24 verse 60. And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, You are our sister. Be you the mother of thousands of millions. And let your seed possess the gates of those who hate them. This is a beautiful blessing. And we need to look at this blessing. Because although Rebecca's family wasn't people that necessarily knew what God had planned and promised to Abraham, they didn't know that God told Abraham that out of him all the families of the earth will be blessed. And we have discussed this very prophetic promise of God to Abraham. They did not know that God had told Abraham that his seed will be multiplied like the stars in heaven, thousands of millions. They did not know that thousands of years later, the Messiah will say that all those who believe are the seed of Abraham, and those who believe, thousands of millions. And yet, listen to their blessing again, so hugely prophetic, from people that did not even know that they are prophetically agreeing with the promises that God has already given. Be the mother of thousands of millions. Wow. How many is that? Think about it. Thousands of millions. Can this be numbered? Can this be counted? Revelation 7 verse 9. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could even number, of all nations and kindred and people and tongues, stood before the throne. Many of you have told me that you're alone in your faith, alone on this path of righteousness that you are walking. Remember Abraham, he was promised so many descendants and the stars of heaven, yet he only had Isaac. Remember Rebecca, she was blessed by a family to be the mother of millions, yet she only had Jacob and Esau gave her a lot of grief. Remember at this very moment, there are millions all over the earth, in every nation, tribe and tongue, that are walking on this path of returning to the ancient ways that God has described his way to be from the beginning, and that Yeshua has told us he is this way. And most of them feel alone, because we are not together, not yet anyway. But we, just like Abraham, just like Rebecca, are looking forward to the fulfillment of the promise, when we, together with all of Israel, will stand as a multitude which no man can number. So remember that when you feel alone again. knowing that our faith, although not fully rewarded now, will carry us through, just like it carried through Abraham, just like it carried through Rebecca, will carry us through until we can also see the fulfillment of the promise. Maybe not in our life. Abraham and Rebecca, maybe not in their life, but they saw, remember, when we see in the Bible, they saw not only physically, but into the future. They saw into the promise, the miraculous promises that God made. They saw the fulfillment of the promise in the future because of their faith. Hebrews 11, verse 6, 9, and 10. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. For he that comes to God must believe that that God is, first of all, and that he is a rewarder. He will reward you, whether in this life or the next, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Abraham diligently sought Yahuwah. Rebecca diligently. Remember we said bucket after bucket, so much effort, so much work that she put in. And also the rest of her life. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, Abraham, as in a strange country. Remember, he had to leave the land of the Chaldeans, and go into a strange country. But he went in faith to this land of promise, in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles, in tents, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Remember, this is Paul talking to us in the book of Hebrews, talking about faith. Faith is to be found in the stories of this man who left his country and his family and went into a strange country. And he lived in tabernacles with Isaac and with Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. Isaac and Jacob also. We'll get to Jacob's life. His firstborn out of his soulmate, which was Rachel. He thought got killed. And where's the fulfillment of his promise? Joseph was his firstborn, and he thought Joseph was killed. But yet these three men, and when we get to Jacob's life, you'll see how he had faith even through everything that happened to him. And these, Isaac and Jacob, were the heirs of the same promise as Abraham. For verse 10, for Abraham looked for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Did Abraham see the city? Did he build it? Did he even know that Jerusalem would be built eventually? And that it would survive until today? What other nation, what other city, what other religion has survived over all these years? There's no other. Go look at Hinduism and Islam and Buddhism. They're all quite new. Islam was only, I must remember now, I did the research. Muhammad was, I think, 600 years after Yeshua. 600 years BC, AC after Christ. The Torah was written by Moses, which is 3,000 years ago. The whole Bible is written by almost 60 different men over a period of almost 2,000 years. And they all agree, from Genesis to Revelation. I've shown you this. Whereas all the other religious books that you find out there, of all the other religions, it's written by one man. And most of them comes from after the time of Christ. And what other nation? If you look at the nation of Israel, where are the Babylonians today? Where are the Philistines? Where are the Greeks and the Romans? I'm not talking about the Greek nation today that lives in Greece. If you look at the biblical nation of the Greeks, Alexander the Great, those guys, where are they? Where's that nation? Where's the Philistines? Where's the Amalekites? Where's the Hittites? Where are the Egyptians in the form that they were in the Bible? Today it's just Islam there in Egypt. The original Egyptians with their religion of the sun god. Yeah, we know the sun god is It's permeated through all their religions, but in the way that they were in the Bible, where are all those? None of those nations have survived. None of them has survived. Only Israel has survived. But Israel has been scattered and they've forgotten about this religion. But in the Jewish nation, the Torah has survived over all these thousands of years. Jerusalem has survived. Which other nation has a city, a Hoofstad, the capital? Which other nation has a capital city that's more than 1,000 years old, that still survive, and that's still the capital city of that religion? None. No other religion, no other nation, no other name. Because Abraham knew that this God that he's busy with is the everlasting one. And they were looking forward to this city. And they knew also it will be physical, but it will of course be spiritual. Because his nation, his descendants, his seed is the New Jerusalem. And this city has foundations on a mountain. And this mountain is the rock, who is Yeshua HaMashiach, that has been promised since the beginning. No other religion has this. Hebrews 11 verse 12. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, which is Abraham, as many as the stars of the sky, in multitude, and as the sand which is by the sea, innumerable. Now this is also promised to Rebecca by her family that weren't even in this religion. But somehow they uttered the same prophetic blessing for her, for hundreds, for thousands of millions, like the sand of the sea. Verse 13, these all died in faith. Abraham is dead. Jacob, Isaac, Rebecca, all of them are dead. They all have died, not having received the promise. But, like we said, they don't only see in the physical. So they died not having received the promise, but having seen them from far off. From there back in ancient days, they saw into the future, not because they were, what is the English word now? Helderziende. Not because they were, you know what I mean. They were not necessarily prophets. They were just normal human beings. But they received the seed of God's word in their hearts. And when they saw their children, even if it was just one, like in Abraham's case, they through him saw in their mind's eye and in their faith, they saw the future fulfillment of all this, and they believed and they trusted. So they all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen the promise from far off, and were persuaded of this promise. So they were persuaded to believe God. They embraced this promise. So they loved it. They loved God and they embraced this. Nobody could convince them otherwise. Although people can say, how can you believe that your children will be like the sand of the sea, Abraham? You've only got Isaac. But he embraced God's promise. And he confessed. Confess it with your mouth. You persuade it in your mind. You embrace it with your heart. And you confess it with your mouth. And that's what you must do. Learn from Abraham. Learn from Isaac. Learn from Jacob. And learn from their wives. These women are our fathers in the faith. And they teach us how to live our lives. And they died not receiving the full promise. But they also looking far off for the resurrection and knowing that when they come into the kingdom, when the time is right, when the time is here for the kingdom to come, they will see all these promises fulfilled. But in their eyes it won't be a surprise because they already believed this thousands of years ago, although they didn't see the promise. So amazing was the faith of our fathers. They eventually died, not having seen the physical fulfillment of the promise. But faith, like we discussed before, is not what is seen with your eyes. Hebrews 11 verse 1. So if faith is not what we see with our eyes, what is faith? verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's a substance. It's something you can touch. It's so real to you that you can touch it. And it's things that you're hoping for, things that God has told you, and you can hope. There's a living hope for you in Yeshua. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. Go and read Hebrews 1:11 verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. So don't look for evidence with your eyes. And don't let people convince you that things will not work out for you because they can't see the evidence. I was made humble yesterday when I was looking at evidence in a woman's life, and I gave her the wrong advice. It's wrong. We need to have this faith of things that we cannot see and trust God to bring that which we cannot see into reality, whether in our life or not. This is faith. The faith that God said, without this, you cannot please Him. Oh, Hebrews 11 is such a beautiful, beautiful book and chapter. Maybe go and read the whole chapter of Hebrews 11. And may your faith be multiplied like the sand of the sea, the stars of the sky. And may your faith bring also forward thousands of millions.